Gildan Media, a division of Recorded Books, presents The 5 Forces That Change Everything: How Technology is Shaping Our Future by Stephen S. Hoffman. Narrated by Rich Miller. Foreword. Dr. Steve Mann. Steve Hoffman's writing is at once brilliant and lucid, hitting home at a time in society when technology is transforming the world and impacting our lives more than ever. The accelerated pace of change is at times difficult for society to comprehend. However, by beginning with the brain as the epicenter of mass connectivity, this book gives us a deep understanding of the human condition. Hoffman outlines 5 forces, which I can summarize in the following 5 words: brain, cyborg, quantum, automation, and singularity. Force 1 is the brain and its associated connectivity. I've personally witnessed this force through co-founding Interaxon, which makes the Muse brain-sensing headband, as well as co-founding Blueberry X, makers of the brain and world-sensing spectacles that monitor our physical, affective, and mental health constantly, even underwater. As our brains become connected in a massively parallel wearable computer network, the social fabric of our society is shifting toward the inclusion of affective computing and health, as well as new ways of communicating and interacting with both the digital and physical worlds. Force 2 is the cyborg age. The cyborg age is the post-human age, also known as transhumanism or posthumanism, in which the very nature of what it means to be human is challenged. I feel a personal sense of connection to this force, as I've often been referred to in the media as the world's first cyborg, and although I don't like the term personally, it has caught on in mainstream culture. In my childhood in the 1960s and 1970s, I experimented with adapting and modifying myself in many crazy ways. Some of these were childhood stupidity, and some resulted in new inventions that had widespread acceptance in the world. This includes wearable computing and wearable artificial intelligence, AI, which I brought to MIT when I founded the Wearable Computing Project. While at MIT, back in 1991, Charles Wyckoff and I coined the term extended reality, which became X-reality and XR intelligence. Today, we can see all these pieces coming together, laying the foundation for the cyborg age. Force 3 is the quantum age of nanoscale, and calls to mind what I might call the post-human age, or the post-cyborg age. This is where we'll be able to develop new materials and nanomachines that not only give us superhuman powers, but fundamentally transform the material world around us. Force 4 is the age of automation, AI, and machine intelligence. It is not only an important force on its own, but represents a force multiplier when combined with the other forces. Endowing machines with human-like intelligence feeds back directly into the cyborg age, and will amplify and accelerate the technological transformation already underway. Force 5 is the singularity, or intelligence explosion. At MIT, we used to say that when an equation contains a singularity, you'll get a division by zero error, meaning some quantity will blow up. In a sense, what we're seeing is division by zero on a massive scale. Software replicates itself at near zero cost and in near zero time. The result is something Marvin Minsky, Ray Kurzweil, and I called the sensory singularity. That is, when sensory intelligence explodes over near zero time and cost. This ultimate force will be the equivalent to splitting atoms in its power and potential to transform and even destroy our species. All of these ideas come together in The 5 Forces That Change Everything in a thoughtful and accessible way, so that anyone trying to stay on top of the latest trends in technology can gain a sense of where we're headed and how these fundamental breakthroughs will alter our lives and the world around us. Dr. Steve Mann has been recognized as the father of wearable computing, IEEE ISSCC 2000, and the father of wearable augmented reality, AR, for his invention of the digital eyeglass, ITAP, and mediated reality, a predecessor of AR. He also invented the chirplet transform, comparametric equations, and high dynamic range, HDR. Mann received his PhD from MIT in 1997 and is a professor of electrical and computer engineering at the University of Toronto, and co-founder of Interaxon and Blueberry X, as well as the co-creator of the discipline of humanistic intelligence, along with Marvin Minsky and Ray Kurzweil. The Forces. Let me introduce myself. My name is Steve Hoffman, but in Silicon Valley they call me Captain Hoff, because I'm the captain and chairman of Founders Space, one of the world's leading startup accelerators. I'm also a venture capitalist, and I've spent the past several years traveling the globe, collaborating with top entrepreneurs, scientists, and visionary thinkers. This has given me unparalleled access to the research and people developing the technologies that will fundamentally impact every person on the planet. I'm about to take you on an extraordinary journey into the minds and ideas of the people poised to reshape our world. I will reveal how new scientific breakthroughs and business ventures are primed to transform our lives and turn science fiction into fact. From Silicon Valley biohackers and lifelike robots in Japan to the world's first three-parent baby in the Ukraine, I will give you an inside look at the limits of what's possible and the incredible impact these developments will have. Each step of the way, I'll show you how these discoveries are part of the 5 fundamental forces driving humanity forward at an unprecedented pace. We're living at a time when the impossible is becoming all too real, and because of that, we must understand where our imagination and ingenuity are taking us. Our creations not only have the power to enable humans to live longer, healthier, richer lives, but also the potential to permanently change or even destroy us. The decisions we make in the coming years will determine who and what the human race becomes. As our machines become capable of doing most of the work people have performed for centuries, we are headed for a massive social reorganization. For example, Nanotech is at the point where it's possible to unleash invisible robots and new materials into the world that can forever alter life on Earth. With genetic engineering, we have taken evolution into our own hands, creating new species of plants and animals that never existed before. We're developing AIs that can predict future events, create lifelike simulations, and learn from their own mistakes. And space technology has advanced to the point where colonizing other planets and discovering alien life forms is within our reach. As the impetus behind the technological changes we see happening around us, the 5 forces will determine the direction humanity takes. Understanding them is crucial because their reach extends across our social structures, from how our economies develop and our institutions function to what will become of our species. To illustrate this, the book is arranged into 5 sections. 1. Mass connectivity, the force driving humans to plug our machines and our brains into interconnected, intelligent digital networks, will radically transform how we live and work, fusing the material and virtual into a new, alternate reality. 2. Bioconvergence, the force driving humans to merge biology with technology, will enable us to decode the building blocks of life, create entirely new species of plants and animals, conquer disease, and heighten human abilities. 3. Human expansionism, the force driving human beings to push to the edges of our known universe, will propel us further into the quantum world and deeper into outer space in order to harness their vast potential. 4. Deep automation, the force driving humans to algorithmically automate all the underlying processes for managing, growing, and sustaining life, will accelerate innovation, create wealth, and free us from the need to work. 5. Intelligence explosion, the force driving us to develop new forms of superintelligence that far surpass human capabilities, will bring into existence sentient machines that run our economies, act as our champions, and merge with our consciousness. For each of the forces, we will delve into the hard questions. How will we adapt to a world with billions of intelligent devices watching, analyzing, and responding to our every move? What would it feel like to connect our brains directly to the internet and interact with one another? Should we modify the genetic code of life to produce new crops, cures for cancer, and DNA-edited babies? What does it mean to merge with our machines and establish a class of cyborgs? And what happens when AI reaches or exceeds the level of human intelligence? As we tackle these questions, I will expose you to numerous scientific discoveries and illuminate the overarching changes underway. My goal is to ignite your imagination as I reveal what lies ahead. Join me on this extraordinary journey and find out where the 5 forces will lead us. Force 1. Mass connectivity. Mass connectivity, the force driving humans to plug our machines and our brains into interconnected, intelligent digital networks, will radically transform how we live and work, fusing the material and virtual into a new, alternate reality. For Homo sapiens to move beyond tribes and build a civilization required a communications revolution. This came in the form of the written word. Writing has permitted people to connect with one another over great physical distances and spans of time. It has allowed us to pass down our accumulated knowledge, traditions, and beliefs from generation to generation. Without writing, we could not have expanded trade, organized religions, and built advanced societies. In other words, innovation and progress would have stagnated without written language. The next major communications breakthrough came with the invention of Gutenberg's printing press. This accelerated the exchange of ideas between people and allowed for the mass dissemination of knowledge. It precipitated the Renaissance, the Enlightenment, and, ultimately, the scientific revolution. The greater the flow of information, the more rapidly civilization progressed. With each key technological milestone, from the Pony Express to the telegraph to the telephone, our ability to communicate with one another and share knowledge has increased exponentially. This leads us to modern times and the advent of computers. What makes these machines so powerful is not just their ever-improving processing power, storage capacity, and portability, but also their ability to talk with one another. Connecting computers together to form the Internet has unleashed the explosion in innovation we see around us. You can compare the Internet to the pathways that connect regions of the human brain. There are billions of neurons in every human brain. Each neuron can have thousands of synapses. Without the trillions of synaptic connections, our brains wouldn't function. In the same way, we have built a global network composed of billions of human brains and computers working together. That's what makes the Internet so powerful. Since the ARPANET, the precursor to the Internet, went live in the late 1960s, each significant network upgrade has spurred unprecedented innovation and productivity gains across the economy. The transition from narrowband to broadband and wired to wireless gave birth to countless new products and services. Even the smallest upgrades matter, because our networks sit at the heart of our innovation ecosystem, and every improvement affects everyone and everything connected to that network. For entrepreneurs, investors, researchers, and corporations to innovate, they need to collaborate, exchange information, and access the latest technologies. Otherwise, they won't be first to market with the next generation of products and services. Upgrading the communications infrastructure won't change the world in and of itself, but some entrepreneur taking advantage of this network will create the next Microsoft or Google. What we have to remember is that technologies don't exist in isolation. They are all part of a single system. Sometimes you can have the most advanced piece of technology ever conceived, but without the ecosystem to support it, it's nothing but an academic experiment. There is no clearer example of this than machine learning algorithms. They had been around for nearly half a century, but their real utility could not be realized until there was a critical mass of people interacting online. Without mass connectivity, these algorithms could not tap into the vast amounts of high-quality data necessary to create products like AI assistants, logistics and supply chain automation, and autonomous vehicles. The same is true for YouTube and Netflix. There were dozens of online video services before the advent of accessible high-bandwidth networks, but they all failed. It was only with the coming of broadband that they took off. Without advances in mass connectivity, they wouldn't exist. So what comes next? Where are we headed from here? Is there another major leap forward in connectivity coming our way? Yes, and it may even rival the Internet itself in terms of magnitude. This next step will be when we successfully develop a robust, high-bandwidth connection from our brains to the Internet. By translating our thoughts directly into digital commands, while simultaneously enabling our brains to access massive amounts of cloud-based information and processing power, we will forever change not only how we communicate, but how we perceive and interact with the world. And when you combine brain-computer interfaces, BCIs, with other technologies, like virtual and augmented reality devices, there will be an explosion in new innovations. Today's VR and AR headsets and primitive brain-reading devices only scratch the surface of what's possible. In the coming decades, we'll look back on these devices much like we do early punch card computers. As mass connectivity moves away from the limits of physical interfaces and toward direct mental interactions, our entire concept of the Internet will change. We won't access the applications, we will live inside them. Imagine what it will be like to walk around with a chip inside your head that allows you to tap into vast amounts of information, process this data, communicate brain to brain with other people, and even exchange fully formed concepts and memories. Will we come to think of the digital and physical as one and the same? Will virtual objects look, behave, and even feel as real as anything in the material world? What will it be like to interact with lifelike avatars and experience a fully augmented reality? These are just a few of the questions to ask as we dive into the next wave of mass connectivity. On this journey, you'll learn about the people and research behind some of the most advanced brain-computer interfaces, neural prosthetics, and cognitive platforms. I'll also expose you to breakthroughs in dream recording and artificial sensory perception, while posing hard questions like, what limits should we place on mind-reading devices? Is it possible to hack a brain and rewrite memories? What are the ethical concerns around having technology that can access our innermost thoughts? And what will it be like to live and work in a mixed reality world? The Neural Pioneers. Machines that can analyze our brainwaves and record our thoughts are being developed in laboratories and companies around the world. These are called brain-computer interfaces, and they have a long history. In 1924, Hans Berger, a German neuroscientist, invented the first electroencephalogram, EEG, which is not that different from those widely used today. Berger's fascination with brainwaves stems from an incident he had as a young man. Initially, he enrolled in university as a mathematics student, with the goal of becoming an astronomer. However, after only one semester, he dropped out and joined the German cavalry. One day, he was out riding his horse and had an accident. Luckily, he wasn't seriously injured, but for some reason, his sister, who was many kilometers away, felt something terrible had happened and made his father telegram him. Berger later wrote that he believed it was a case of spontaneous telepathy, in which at a time of mortal danger, and as I contemplated certain death, I transmitted my thoughts, while my sister, who was particularly close to me, acted as the receiver. After this, Berger became obsessed with figuring out how his mind could have transmitted a signal to his sister. He returned to university determined to study medicine, in the hope of discovering the physiological basis of this psychic energy. That eventually led him to develop the first EEG device, which could detect brainwaves. An EEG is simply an array of sensors placed on a person's head that measures changes in the electrical activity in the brain. The EEG can sense voltage changes in ionic current within and between neurons. Let's be clear, an EEG cannot read your thoughts, but it can record the electrical signals emanating from your brain, and a computer can match patterns. If a computer knows that a specific pattern is associated with a certain mental state, word, or action, it can decipher this information and understand something about your thought processes. Today's startups are using EEG devices to capture digitized signals and send them to computers for storage and data processing. Analyzing the resulting brainwave patterns can tell us a bit about what is going on inside the brain. For example, beta waves are associated with a person being awake, attentive, and alert, while alpha waves are associated with being relaxed, calm, and lucid. Other waves are associated with different mental states, like that aha moment when someone recognizes something. Although the waves are low resolution, entrepreneurs are using EEGs to create all sorts of applications, from mobile apps that help people meditate to software for tracking mental fitness. The advantages of EEG devices are that they're non-invasive, meaning you don't have to insert probes inside your brain, and relatively inexpensive. You can go out and buy a brain-sensing headband for a few $100s or less online. However, the problem with the current consumer-grade EEG devices is that they often don't work that well. The signals tend to be noisy because the connections between the electrodes and the scalp are imperfect. There are often too few electrodes in consumer devices to get accurate readings. Hair also gets in the way, and any movement of the skin can generate false signals. That said, in the lab, EEGs can work pretty well. Keep in mind, we're still in the early days of brain-computer interfaces, and things will only improve. Some of the biggest changes are coming in the form of more sophisticated AI that can filter out the noise and better decipher complex brainwaves. Neurable, a Boston startup, is using machine learning to measure and classify EEG signals in order to provide greater accuracy. Ramses Al-Khaid, who showed his entrepreneurial spirit at a young age, is the visionary CEO behind the company. He was 4 years old when his father moved the family from Mexico to the United States in search of better opportunities. When he was 6, he started to buy and fix broken video games, then sell them for a profit. By the age of 9, he was earning money repairing computers. After getting his PhD in neuroscience from the University of Michigan, he launched Neurable, which perfectly combined his intellectual interests and knack for business. When we met, Al-Khaid shared his plans to build a brain-computer operating system. Much like we have iOS and Android for smartphones, he believes we will need an advanced operating system for the next generation of brain-computer interfaces. Neurable is taking the first step toward this by developing a pair of brain-controlled consumer headphones that can control music directly through your thoughts. Founded by CEO Spencer Jarrell, an innovative academic with a background in cognitive psychology, Spark Neuro is another fascinating neurotech startup. Its technology analyzes people's brainwaves as they watch video content. Using the biofeedback data, the company helps TV networks to produce better shows, and advertisers sell more products. Spark Neuro's product functions like a focus group, except that instead of asking people for their opinions, the EEG device captures their immediate neural activity, and a deep learning algorithm determines what they actually think. This is important because what people say they think during a focus group and what they truly feel are often different. Many times, participants will conform to group opinion and say what they think other people want to hear. Spark Neuro's brain-computer interface and deep learning algorithm reveal how we actually feel at a fundamental non-verbal level. So, how do they do it? Spark Neuro demonstrates that when people are watching playful videos of babies, puppies, and kittens, their system can clearly detect the changes in brainwaves. It mirrors the changes seen when people are happy, which may explain why those super cute animal videos go viral. They even tested the technology on independent voters leading up to the 2016 presidential elections. The AI predicted that Donald Trump would win based on the reactions of the people participating. Can this type of brain science lead advertisers to sell more products? Some of the world's biggest brands believe so. Spark Neuro's clients include Hulu, NBC, Barclays, GM, and Anheuser-Busch. It's possible that if enough consumers adopt brain-computer interfaces for everyday use, gathering this type of data may become as common as analytics on websites. Halfway around the world in South Korea, SOSO is a startup that uses EEGs in education and healthcare. Over seemingly endless cups of soju and plates of spicy food, we discussed the future of brain-computer interfaces. Dongbin Min, the CEO, explained how this technology can help students learn to focus better. As students play a series of learning games that run on tablets, they wear EEG devices that monitor their brain waves and provide neurofeedback. The games use the incoming data to alter the gameplay in real time in order to improve each student's performance and concentration levels. It can be particularly valuable to children with learning disorders. Min's team is using similar neurofeedback games to enable elderly people to improve memory function and slow cognitive decline. This field is still in its infancy, but Min is determined to figure out how brain-computer interfaces can be used in novel ways to advance both education and healthcare. On the cutting edge of EEG research, Adrian Nestor, a leading neuroscientist and professor at the University of Toronto, has conducted experiments with far-reaching implications. He had test subjects look at an image on a computer screen. Then, using an EEG cap, along with machine learning algorithms, he was able to digitally reconstruct the image using only the signals from the brain. In other words, he managed to pluck an image right out of someone's head and transfer it to a computer. There are many possible uses for this technology. In the future, you may be able to take your visual memories and upload them as images to the cloud. Or, if you wear an EEG cap at night, you may be able to capture images directly from your dreams. Another possibility is to enable people who are unable to verbally communicate, like stroke victims, to express themselves with mental images instead of words. It could also have forensic uses for law enforcement in gathering eyewitness information on potential suspects, rather than relying on verbal descriptions provided to a sketch artist, says Nestor. Someday, lawyers may use images captured from the brains of witnesses as evidence in a court of law. If that's not wild enough, researchers at the University of California, Berkeley ran an experiment where they captured video images of what test subjects were visualizing in their heads. To accomplish this, they had to go beyond EEG and use functional magnetic resonance imaging, fMRI, which measures brain activity by detecting changes associated with blood flow. In an experiment, volunteers laid down inside an fMRI machine for hours while watching Hollywood movie trailers. The brain activity was fed into a computer program that learned to associate visual patterns in the movie with corresponding brain activity. The final results were a blurry but recognizable video reproduction of what the volunteers were seeing inside their heads. At this stage, it isn't ready for prime time. No one wants to sleep inside a bulky fMRI machine every night simply to record their dreams. However, eventually, technology like this may allow us to wake up in the morning and watch our dreams. Despite promising results in labs around the world, the current generation of devices are still limited. If we really want to jump straight into the future of mass connectivity and link our brains to the internet, nothing beats implanting a brain chip. Would you mind letting someone pry open your skull and insert some sensors? This technology is headed our way, like it or not. Neural implants and brain chips. If you look at the evolution of Homo sapiens, our brains haven't changed in the past 30,000 years. We have essentially the same brains that our prehistoric ancestors had when they were living in caves. However, the world around us has changed dramatically. How is it possible that our prehistoric brains can function in a modern, high-tech society that's profoundly different from the thousands of years we spent as hunter-gatherers? It's because our brains are incredibly malleable. The human brain is not hard-coded. It has a high degree of plasticity. Its neural pathways can be easily.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?